it's kind of like a glacier. Although this has been slow moving, their attempts to block or kind of disinfect social media have been okay, but they are still ill prepared for a fast moving and a rapidly evolving viral type of a news event.
Hello and welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm Elizabeth Dwoskin, the Post Silicon Valley correspondent, and I'm delighted to welcome Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube. Thanks for being here, Susan.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Susan, I'm really excited for this conversation on many levels. First, it's the moment. This is like a year of really seismic changes in our society. We're in the midst of a global pandemic. It's a consequential presidential election, and the country is protesting for racial justice. And all of these are issues where social media plays a huge role. And then I feel like I have followed your journey as a reporter, almost like 4 years ago to the current moment. When going into the last election, I think social media companies were really taken aback by the scale of Russian meddling and misinformation surging up on the platforms, including yours. And today, when I report on the company, we're still going to call you out for your problems, but it's a more mature company. It's a different company.
Definitely, it's been a historic year by any measurement, and I don't think any of us could have foreseen how many changes that we would all be grappling with and challenges. And since 2016, we've made tremendous changes at YouTube. So we've been really focused on what we call responsibility and all the different products and policy and changes that we need to make as a result of that. And I think, while there's still work to do and there'll always be work to do, we've come a long way. And, I'd be happy to talk about any questions you have on that front, but it's been really important for me. This is of course, a very uncharted area for everybody. And so I just want to make sure always that as we're making decisions that I'm thinking about things in terms of being on the right side of history. It might be hard right now, but how will we think about it in the future? And how can I make sure that YouTube is on the right side of history?
That's the right compass. I'd love to dive into the news. Even though I think you guys have really gotten a lot better at stopping some of the abuse and misinformation, there's still some big stories that have slipped through the cracks. And most recently, there was the video called Plandemic that shot up on YouTube. It was a video, as you're familiar, that alleged that Dr. Fauci had a role in spreading the virus, and that masks actually spread coronavirus, and all sorts of misinformation. So how did that video become one of the top trending videos on YouTube?
Yeah. Well, so we have definitely updated our policy many times since the COVID-19 crisis hit. I think we've implemented more than 10 different policies. And it definitely is a policy violation. I can go through to say, for example, the virus doesn't exist, or that you can take any kind of unsubstantiated cures that have not been verified. And so Plandemic was a video that was violative of our policies. We did remove it. But what happened is that there were a large number of people who re-uploaded that video, and they tried a whole variety of different techniques, whether it was speeding it up or slowing it down or putting it in a frame or changing it in a whole bunch of ways. And it just took some time for our systems to be able to catch that all. We use a combination of people and machines, and we were able to ultimately bring all of those copies down. But there was a moment in time where there was just a challenge in our enforcement, but it was never an issue with policy. It always was a violation of our policies.
Do you think it's fair then for journalists like me to say then that despite the company's best efforts, even with your best efforts and policies in place, that you can't stop the worst from coming? You can't stop this misinformation from reaching millions and millions of people?
Well, I mean, I want to make sure we take responsibility, and we always know that we can do better. And with really every single issue, we look and we do a postmortem and we say, how could we have done better? What did we learn from this incident? And how can we make sure that we, in the future, we make different changes? And so, our systems are constantly getting better. We're constantly adjusting to whatever the last attack was. That's not going to be the next attack because we will have already closed that loophole. But we do take responsibility. We want to make sure that we're providing, that we're doing the best we can. We want to, especially in sensitive areas, whether it's news or medicine, that we're providing accurate information for our users.
And what about, so you recently talked about how YouTube will donate, I think, $100 million to Black creators to promote Black creators on the site. But there is a lawsuit from Black creators, a small group of Black creators, arguing that YouTube's algorithms systemically discriminate. And recently I was just checking like the highest paid YouTube influencers, and none of them are Black. Why is that?
Well, so YouTube's always been a platform that is open, and we've actually really prided ourselves on the fact that we have such a diverse group of creators. And I think if you look across our platform, and you look across any socio-demographic group, you're going to see that YouTube has a well-represented set of creators. And we did make the 100 million donation to be able to amplify Black voices, because even though we are a platform that's open and prided ourselves in the diversity that we have, we thought it was really important to be able to do even more. And so that is a content commitment, a multi-year commitment to amplifying Black voices on the platform. And I'm very excited that we're doing it. We actually did our first original with it just this Saturday, which, if you haven't seen, I think was just really insightful, which was Bear Witness, Take Action. And we were able to bring together a large number of thought leaders and across many different areas to be able to reflect on what we're going through right now and some of the challenges and some of the systemic racial inequality. And the lawsuit is that's a new one. We're certainly going to look into it and take it very seriously and try to understand what concerns are there. But I would actually say that we actually have seen a lot of success among different Black creators, like whether you say Jackie Aina, who actually is a beauty creator who started by making sure that she was able to talk about products for people of color, and she was one of the first. Marcus Brownlee, for example, is actually a tech reviewer, and he's probably our top, if not one of our very best creators reviewing tech. He's come to all the Google events, and he did some really nice reflection on reflecting on the color of my skin just recently. So we've been really proud that we have so many creators, and we'll look into that lawsuit and make sure that we're responsive to whatever concerns there are.
Yeah, are you able to examine whether your algorithms actually, for example, would favor creators of one race over another? Is that something that you're examining? Can you even?
Yes. Well, so we don't have. I mean, right now it's not like our systems understand race or any of those different demographics. So, but on the other hand, like what we do is whenever we get allegations or concerns like that, we certainly can work with third parties or hear what are the questions or concerns that people have and look into that and try to understand. And machine learning fairness is a huge area of work just across the industry at Google and at YouTube. And so we always want to make sure, for example, that our machines haven't by accident learned something that isn't what we intended. And if we ever find that it did, then we will retrain our machines to make sure that they now have the right, that whatever that issue was has been removed from the training set of our machines.
Mm-hmm. And what about, still on the topic of race? I think one of the most salient criticisms of YouTube, and we've written about it, is that YouTube has sort of enabled this generation of far right creators to go viral and get huge audiences and make tons of money on the platform as well. People who said that people of color were a separate species. I think we quoted in a story once activists talking about how YouTube became the online library for the far right. So thinking about that in light of the protests right now, I wanted to ask you a question that I hope that all CEOs are asking themselves right now, and all individuals, which is, how has your company contributed to systemic racism in society?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a really important question and certainly a deep question. And I think the recent events and the fight for racial equality have been, very. It's been a historic time, and it's been really important to me that we are doing everything we can, and to look at our systems and to take a hard look and say, how can we do better? And so, we recently just did a pledge. The pledge was the $100 million content creation to make sure we are amplifying Black voices, and a commitment that we would look at our policies and products. Again, we want to make sure that they're fair for everyone. And but we're going to take a hard look, in particular with regard to the Black community, given some of the concerns, and make sure that we're closing any gaps that are there. I will say that we did a really huge change to our systems last year, where we updated our hate and harassment policies. So in our hate policy, we would not enable anyone to use gender, race, religion, sexual orientation as a means of discrimination to promote violence, separation, segregation. And anyway, that's just a kind of highlight of how that would work. So it could be that you're referencing content that was on our platform that is now no longer there. We actually also released a number of videos that we've removed. And just in the last quarter, we removed over 100,000 videos that were violations of the hate policy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I should have actually said that one of the ones that the specific one that I referenced that has been taken, that creator has been banned from the platform. And we even wrote last year about how some of those sweeps that you did, because you've gotten more aggressive in response to criticism, even took down videos about Nazi Germany that were put up by educational groups and teachers.
Yeah. So with every policy change, there's always going to be unintended consequences, and so we work really hard to make sure that our policies are done in a way that are consistent and fair, and that we do it in a way that can be that doesn't have any of those unintended consequences. But on the Nazi Germany videos, so it used to be, for example, that we allowed videos of Nazi Germany or various speeches. And when there was no context allowed, so just historical video. And what happened, and we realized that could be subject to abuse in a variety of different ways. And so we now still allow that content, but if for educators or for nonprofits, we make sure that there is actually contextual content associated with that video. So it can be before or afterwards, or in the four corners. We talk about the four corners of the video, making sure that it's available for users to understand, because otherwise that content can be abused in ways that none of us intended.
So
and we work we tell them that, and we educate them. They call us and we let them know, like, this is our new policy and how you can re-upload the content, but there needs to be context available.
I think it's so interesting that you bring that up. It raises something that I wanted to talk about with you, which is, okay, so you guys are adding context to content. You're now putting out banners with authoritative news sources, like, for example, on a mass shooting or the George Floyd protest. I can literally get go to an information center on the top of YouTube where you tell me you're curating and feeding me authoritative sources, much like on Google. And you're also taking a much more aggressive role in curating what types of creators should be allowed on the platform or not based on your rules. So given right now that there's this big debate in Washington where the Trump administration is moving to erode some of the legal immunities for tech platforms on the argument that they're no longer the neutral pipes, do you think that, well, first of all, what do you think about that move by the Trump administration? And also, do you think that in some ways you guys already are a media company, that you're already not neutral based on all the stuff that you're doing?
Mm-hmm. So yes, so Section 230 is an incredibly important piece of legislation, and yes, I'm very concerned about changes that could be made to it and the implications. It gives us protection in a few ways, which is, first of all, to be an open platform. And if you look at YouTube, we don't have people who produce content. We are just a platform for other people who produce content. And we're able to be open. We're enabled to allow all types of people to upload content. And we think that gives incredible diversity. But 230 also, it gives us protection when we take down content. And running one of these platforms, I can tell you, you have to be able to manage your community. Otherwise, your community gets hurt. So you can't be allowing hate and harassment, violent extremism. You have to have child safety. And the Section 230 enables us to have those protections. And so I would say when we make the policies are not on content. It's not like we're making content. We're just making policies about what we will allow on our platform. And when we make those policies, we go to a broad range of experts to try to understand what's the right way to be able to do that without any of the unintended consequences. If there were guidance from the government about what was hate or what was harassment, we could adopt that and we could use that. But there isn't. And so as a result, we're left having to go and talk to experts and figure out what that policy is. And if we didn't do that, I can assure you that the site would have a lot of real issues that would be really hurtful. And we want to make sure that we're protecting our community.
Do you think that there should be a regulatory body that literally says this is what is hate speech, so that Facebook can't make one decision and YouTube make another and Twitter make another?
I mean, if there was more guidance about what were the definitions, that could be really helpful. So Europe, for example, does have much stricter hate laws, and we were able to implement. We were able to use some of that when we looked at how our guidance. But right now there's not in most countries and not in the U.S. And so as a result, like we need to go out and we need to talk to experts and we need to figure that out. But provided that there was guidance that was reasonable and everybody could agree, sure, we'd be happy to implement that. And whenever there is guidance, like we do implement it.
Wow. So in some way, you actually agree with the Trump administration that there should be some government authority perhaps saying what is bias, what is hate speech, what kind of speech should be allowed online. I mean, that's effectively what the Trump administration is trying to do.
Well, I'm not sure that I would say I necessarily agree. But what I would say is that, when you run a platform, you do need to have clear policies. And there's always going to be debate about what those policies are. Half the people are going to say you didn't go far enough. The other half are going to say you went too far. Certainly whenever there are rules, like we implement that. Like I said, with the hate policy that has been in Europe, like we implemented that years ago with regard to how that was handled in Europe. We want to be good citizens. We want to be good players. We want to protect our community, and YouTube's an incredibly valuable resource for so many people. We'll continue to work with all different third parties and come up with those right policies. But, we are not necessarily, we're not creating the content. We are just a platform that is coming up with the ways that we want to manage our community.
I want to talk for a moment about President Trump. Recently, Twitter and Facebook took very different approaches to a piece of content, to a post and a tweet by President Trump. And the tweet was a racially divisive tweet and a post on Facebook where he said, in reference to the protests in Minnesota and the National Guard going in, he said, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, which was a reference to the civil rights era when the National Guard went into protest in that time. Now, I think you guys were a little bit saved by the bell because he didn't post that on YouTube. But my question to you is, if he did, would you have taken it down?
So first of all, it's really hard to always comment on a theoretical, like what the video would have had or what it would have done. But I will tell you that we, for elected officials, we hold them to the same standards that we hold all of our other users and uploaders. And so if there is an elected official and they do post content that is hateful or promotes violence in some way, like that is content. And that would be the basis for removal of that content. That said, whenever you have an elected official, there's always going to be re-uploads of that content, but by news organizations. So Washington Post, I'm sure, would cover that and could have like a snippet of that statement. But because it's in context, we would allow it because there would be the context and there would be potentially like the historical commentary associated with it. And so that content, in theory, it would still be there, but it would be surrounded with context. But yes, something like that could be a violation of our policies. And if it is, then we would remove it.
I see. So just to kind of pin you a little, push you a little further on that one, you're saying that you would have allowed the Trump post if there had been context around it, like news articles explaining what it meant, versus if he just said went on YouTube and posted a video and said, "I'm looking at what's happening in Minnesota when the looting starts, the shooting starts."
Well, what I'm saying is just to be really clear is that if a video was uploaded by a politician, any elected official, and it had something that crossed our line with regard to hate speech or inciting violence, like we would remove that content. Okay, but you, Washington Post, would probably cover it, and you may have a clip of that we removed. But because you're providing commentary, we would not remove the Washington Post version of it. So that would still be there, and users would still have the information about what's happening in our society, but the actual clip coming directly from that politician would not be accessible anymore.
So you can't speculate a little about whether that Trump post would have broken your rules? I know you were following it closely.
I'm sure. Yeah, I just want to say it's always really hard to speculate on something that is theoretical, in terms of what the video is or the context or how it was said. But I want to just emphasize again that we apply the same rules to politicians, and if something violated or incited violence, we would remove it.
Yeah, and that's very different from Facebook, which has an exception for politicians and political leaders, and YouTube, which did actually until recently. They've kind of walked away from that. Um,
Um, I'm trying to remember exactly when that policy was put in place, but it's been there for, at least a couple of quarters.
that's interesting. Was it a hard call for you?
Um, I think we wanted to speak with experts about it and really understand the implications of what that meant. But after thinking about it, and we realized like you have to have the same standards for your politicians, otherwise, it becomes this double standard. So, I think once we implemented that, and again we've had it for a while, I want to say like definitely last year we were talking about it. So, it definitely is the right decision for us.
Have you removed any videos from President Trump? I know you've removed several from the Brazilian president, Bolsonaro.
Yes. Yes, we did. On Bolsonaro from that were COVID related. I think on President Trump, not that I'm aware of. There have been some ads that may have had different technical issues, like just and that's really common practice for our advertisers. So we actually have a political database of all the videos that have been uploaded, how they were targeted, and so every single time Trump is advertised on YouTube, you can see that. And I think there were some back and forth on some of the technical details of some of the implementations, and that's really standard for advertisers.
Okay, that's interesting. You answered one of my questions, which was I knew there were some Trump ads that had been removed, and it was for technical reasons. All right. Um,
Yeah, they were technical reasons.
okay. And what about? Let's go to the protests. I'm just curious. What social media platform is your go-to for information about the protests, like footage?
Mhm. Well, of course, I'm going to say YouTube is a go-to
Your
platform. I
YouTube.
think we have pretty good coverage across the board. But I also will say that different platforms are strong in different areas, and I think that's actually some of the beauty of having multiple platforms. So, I'll say some of the Twitter is really focused on the real time aspect of what's happening right now. YouTube, I would say, has the benefit of having a lot of content that is both short and long form, but is really a lot of times little more produced than some of the other mobile video content that we would see. And it enables a lot more thoughtful discussions about what's happening. And so I think if you're looking for like what's happening in the moment or what's like a clip of someone at a protest, there are going to be other platforms where you may have a larger selection of videos. But if you really want to understand what's happening, if you want to see the leading thinkers on what are their thoughts in terms of the fight for racial equality, what's happening with regard to George Floyd protests, then I think YouTube is a great place to go because we're going to have news and we're going to have a large number of commentary and YouTubers who are going to comment on that and really be able to reflect on what's happening right then and there.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I was going to say, like, during this cycle, I've been using Twitter and TikTok for breaking news and footage and like actually seeing what's happening at the protest today. But if I wanted to go back and maybe say what happened at the protest like 3 days ago, or I would be going to YouTube. But I was wondering, do you think that that's a shift? Because I'm trying to remember, like in previous news, breaking news events, like some of the ones I've covered, like the Christchurch shooting, I feel like YouTube was more of a go-to source. Is that fair, or what's the difference there? Do you think something's
Uh,
shifting?
I don't know if it's shifting. YouTube, well, I've always thought about YouTube as a library in the sense that we have a large collection of content and we're not just focused on what's happening right in the moment. And so you can actually go and you can understand any conflict and get content associated with that. So, I think every platform has its benefits. We also have a lot of short form content. We have a shorts product. People can upload mobile video to YouTube. We see mobile video that does really, really well on our platform. But I do think that because we're not focused on what happened today, other platforms will have this is a content of today and then it disappears. It's harder to find the next day. You can find the content of what happened 5 days ago, 10 days ago, a month ago on YouTube, and that's all accessible and available. So that's why I use the library as a analogy. And I think we've always been focused on that. We've always had good search. We've always hosted everything. It's always available. It doesn't disappear. And so that's the way I would recommend using YouTube. But freshness and what's the current event and what's happening is also incredibly important that we have that and we have all the latest clips. So we did have actually, just so you know, at George Floyd, at one point we had over 200 million views of people watching videos with George Floyd in the name. So just to give you perspective, that's actually quite a lot of usage just there looking to understand what was happening right then at the moment.
Wow. And was that people uploading protest video in real time, or was that anything from like Washington Post summaries, not to plug the post, but news summaries of what was happening as well?
They were views basically of any commentary that had the name George Floyd in it. So it could be upload, it could be protest at George Floyd, protesting the death of George Floyd, or it could be a Washington Post story, for example, just covering what happened with regard to George Floyd. So we have really significant volume across the board. But what I think is unique about us is the fact that we host and store and make everything available from any point in the past.
That's fascinating that you see YouTube as a library more than a place for breaking news or real-time events. That's how you've always felt, and that's you're comfortable in that. Is that kind of the niche that
Oh,
you're
no.
comfortable?
I mean, we do have a breaking news show. I mean, when you go to a library, you actually can read the newspaper there too, right? You can actually see everything. You can get all the books, you can get the magazine, you get the newspaper. So, like, our goal is that we can cover everything. And actually, with COVID, we actually had a breaking news shelf that's been there pretty much every day since COVID's, first really broke. We have that in 30 countries, and so we do. And news, we've seen a 75% increase in COVID-related news from authoritative sources. So we have seen a lot of news, but we will also see people not just looking at the news. We'll see them looking for longer commentary and thoughts. And so, like, our average watch time of people on YouTube is often an hour or more. And so people aren't coming just to say, like, just read the headlines. What happened? Show me something for 3 minutes. They actually really want to engage and understand the issues at a deeper level.
That's fascinating. I keep saying that, but really I'm learning a lot, which is cool considering that I thought I knew a lot. But um, I want to ask you two last really quick questions, which
Sure.
is, so I recently saw the report that, kids under 20 are spending almost as much time on TikTok as on YouTube. How much is TikTok a threat?
Mm. Well, I think this, first of all, shows how dynamic our environment is. And
Yeah.
that, yeah. And so it definitely shows that, here's a new player coming out of China and that has a lot of adoption. And I mean, I see that too. I see that all over kids on TikTok. And, in many ways, I think this is just shows that we have a dynamic environment, that there's always room for innovation, and And it is a competitor, but it also, we all learn from each other. And so I think digital video is a huge space. There are going to be new competitors. We see that across the board. So just this year, we saw a lot of new entrants, but they were more on the premium subscription, whether it was Quibi or Disney or Apple or HBO Max, right? So this is just a very competitive space, and I expect to continue to see more competitors.
Yeah, that's very true. And speaking of kind of the ground shifting really quickly, I want to ask you, lastly, is that you're a mom of 5, unbelievable. And
Yeah.
so, and your kids are school age. So they're all going through this transformation where school in real life won't be as important in the next year and a half. Are you thinking differently about, obviously, tons of kids are on YouTube already. Are you thinking differently about kind of strategy, the role that YouTube can play?
Mhm. Well, YouTube is a really incredible way to learn. And we did see homeschooling and the queries, then the people searching for homeschooling double since we had COVID-19. And, I'll just say as a mom, I see it as a super useful resource whenever my kids are asking me something in math or science or something I forgot. I just tell them go to YouTube, and there's always like 10 videos to pick from that are explaining that concept better than I ever could. So I do think YouTube is an incredible resource for learning, but to really learn, you need to do tests, and you need to have a teacher, and you need to do problem sets. And so I really think about YouTube as being an important source, but not necessarily. But it needs to be married with other services that can help kids learn online. But it is pretty amazing the way kids are all learning online right now. And we're certainly going to double down and invest more in education and what we can do with YouTube to support all the schools. And we see it's a big opportunity. And like I said, we see ourselves as a library. So the more that we can work with schools to be able to highlight the library that can be useful to them, I think it will benefit everybody.
Well, we're past time, so I want to thank you so much for the conversation. I learned a lot, and I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Also, want to plug that tomorrow we're going to be doing a special event in at Washington Post Live, commemorating the legacy of Juneteenth. That event will be with Lonnie Bunch, who is the founding director of the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. You can register by going to WashingtonPostLive.com. Again, thanks so much. My name is Elizabeth Dwoskin. I'm the Post Silicon Valley correspondent.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for watching.